Starting off this countdown, we have the Vipholm experiments. This was a series of experiments in Sweden from 1945 to 1955. It's literally going to make you sick to your stomach when you find out what they did. Basically, they force-fed people with mental illness sweets to see if sugar was related to tooth decay. Imagine people just cramming food down your throat against your will. It's very gross. These experiments were conducted by the government and sponsored by the sugar industry. The experiments lasted for about 2 years, and by then the teeth of about 50 of the subjects in the experiment had been completely ruined. In our 9th spot, we had the UK Special Demonstration Squad. This is the name of a group of undercover police officers in the UK. Now, the things that they did are going to shock you. For example, they would steal birth certificates and identities of people that had died at a young age. They'd make sure that they would be around their age and then use their identities. The younger the person died, the better, because that means they didn't already live a life that they would have to cover up. And then they would go around with this new identity. Some cases they actually got into relationships with women, but the whole time they did so just to spy on them. In November of 2015, the Metropolitan Police Force apologized to 7 women tricked into relationships by these officers. Like, imagine that, dating someone you're madly in love with, sometimes even having a kid with them, only for them to be like, oh, sorry, gotta go, was only dating you to get intel on you and your friend circle. It's disgusting, and it's actually happened to multiple women. In our 8th spot, we have the radioactive waste. Apparently, there's a huge radioactive dumping zone located in Tonawanda, New York. In fact, they dumped more than 37 million gallons of radioactive waste from their World War II atomic bomb tests. This area has a high rate of cancer and thyroid conditions, and this is the reason why, and no one's talking about it.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Order of the Nine Angels. This culty cult is a controversial and secretive organization that has been associated with the occult, Satanism, as well as having ties to some pretty controversial, hateful, and horrible beliefs. The group's origins are murky, but it is believed to have been founded in the United Kingdom in the 1970s. The ONA claims to be based on the principles of traditional Satanism and advocates for a return to pre-Christian pagan society. The teachings of the group are said to be highly esoteric and involve a very complex system of rituals, beliefs, and practices, which sounds really cool and mysterious until you hear that the group has been accused of promoting violence, extremism, and hate. Many people have accused the group of practicing black magic, as well as using the practice of summoning demons, and apparently this group has even been able to be linked to horrifying crimes, which include killings. Because of the nature of the controversy surrounding this group, its teachings have been banned in several countries, but despite these bans, the group continues to operate in secret, with its members communicating online and in private meetings. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a mystical and magical organization that emerged in the late 19th century in England. It was founded by 3 prominent figures: William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers, and William Robert Woodman. All 3 of these guys were fascinated by the esoteric teachings of ancient civilizations and sought to create a system that combined spiritual and mystical practices. The order drew upon various mystical and occult traditions, including Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and tarot, in order to create a comprehensive system of magical practices. Its teaching emphasized personal development, spiritual evolution, and the attainment of spiritual knowledge and enlightenment. The order's rituals and teachings were highly secretive and were only accessible to members who had undergone a rigorous initiation process. Its members included prominent figures such as Aleister Crowley, of course, W.B. Yeats, and Arthur Edward Waite, who went on to make significant contributions to the fields of mysticism and occultism. Despite the relatively short existence of this group, the order has had a profound impact on modern Western esotericism and continues to inspire spiritual seekers and magicians to this day. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Kabiri Mysteries. The Kabiri Mysteries refer to a set of ancient Greek religious practices and rituals associated with the Kabiri deities, a group of enigmatic gods worshipped in various regions of Greece, particularly on the island of Samothrace. The mysteries involved secretive initiation ceremonies that were performed exclusively by the initiated members of the cult and were believed to impart special knowledge and spiritual power to the participants. participants. It's one of the most secretive religious groups in history, and the exact nature of the group remains the subject of intense debate among scholars because there is so little information to go on. It is generally believed that the cult was closely connected to the cults of Demeter and Persephone, and that the initiation rites involved elements of mysticism, fertility rites, and underworld symbolism. This mystery group exerted a significant influence on the development of Greek religion and culture, and were celebrated by various communities throughout the Hellenistic world. Despite the mystery that shrouds them, the Kabiri Mysteries continues to fascinate scholars and enthusiasts alike, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the ancient religious practices of Greece. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan is a religious organization founded in 1966 by Anton LaVey. Despite its name, the Church of Satan does not worship Satan as a deity, but rather advocates for individualism, self-indulgence, and rational thinking. LaVey created the Church of Satan as a reaction to what he saw as the hypocrisy of mainstream religion and the repressive nature of society at the time. The Church of Satan's philosophy is centered around the concept that Satan is a symbol of rebellion and individual freedom. Members believe in indulging in their desires and pursuing their own happiness as long as it doesn't harm others. The church also promotes the idea of magic as a tool for self-improvement and self-realization. Heard that's where the demon summoning comes in. Demons aren't all bad, some can be helpful, you just need to know what you're doing. Of course, with a name like the Church of Satan, you're gonna face some controversy, and this group certainly has received its fair share of criticism over the years, with many accusing it of promoting evil and immorality. The organization maintains that it is a legitimate religion with a unique philosophy and worldview. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is a religious organization that was founded in 1975 by Michael Aquino, a former member of the Church of Satan. Wow, what a crazy connection. The Temple of Set is based on the philosophy of Setianism, and the group mainly focuses on the worship of Set, an ancient Egyptian deity associated with chaos, strength, and individuality. The Temple of Set is unique among religious organizations in that it places a strong emphasis on individualism and self-realization. It also incorporates elements of ancient Egyptian religion, as well as ideas from other Western esoteric traditions. Members of the Temple of Set are encouraged to pursue knowledge and self-discovery through practices such as meditation, ritual magic, and intellectual inquiry. The organization is very secretive and very exclusive, with membership only available through invitation. While believing in and worshipping the deity, those who belong to this group also believe in the existence of demons and other supernatural entities. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Manson family, started by the horrible Charles Manson. His story starts off when Manson was released from prison in 1967, where he then moved to San Francisco, where he gained a small following that would eventually go on to be the cult known as the Family. This charismatic yet very unstable ex-convict attracted a group of young and vulnerable followers who believed he was a messianic figure with profound insights into society and the future of humanity. And not only this, but they also believed that he had supernatural powers as well. The group eventually moved to an abandoned ranch outside of Los Angeles, and it was here that Manson continued to brainwash his followers and manipulate them with his own religious philosophies. Manson's followers carried out these brutal killings under his instructions, which he claimed were a part of a twisted plan to incite a race war he called Helter Skelter. In the end, Manson and several of his followers were eventually arrested and charged for the crimes, with a trial that was highly publicized. Manson's bizarre behavior and manipulative tactics in court further solidified his reputation as a deranged cult leader, and the story of this cult has had a lasting impact on American culture and continues to fascinate and absolutely horrify people to this day. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, was a medieval Christian military order that was founded in the 12th century to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land during the Crusades. The order became known for their bravery and skill in battle, and they quickly gained wealth and power throughout Europe. The Knights Templar became one of the most influential and respected organizations of their time, with members including knights, monks, and priests who took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They were known for their distinctive white mantles with a red cross and their motto, "Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory." However, their power and wealth eventually became a threat to some European monarchs and the church, which many claim led to their downfall. downfall. The Knights Templar were disbanded in the early 14th century, especially since they were being accused of heresy and devil worship by the Catholic Church. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have SIM cards. We see all the time in movies and shows when people are trying to be super secret, they smash their phone and their SIM card, but as it turns out, maybe we should all be smashing our SIM cards, super secret lifestyle or not. In February of 2015, it was reported that Snowden provided documents that showed that the NSA and GCHQ had hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year, and they supply places like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and a variety of other providers. While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both voice and data transmissions of every user that has a SIM card made by this company. The company did reply to the situation and said that they had been the target of at least 2, quote, particularly sophisticated intrusions, and they suggested that they believed that the NSA and the GCHQ were responsible, but the company then denied that the hack was successful in gaining access to those encryption keys.
Number 9. Quantum computer. This next one is eye-opening, to say the least. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are going to ruin my life. They're getting really good at those. I feel like an old man every time I see those and fall for it. But thanks to our man Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. How fun must that be? It's called the quantum computer, and it cost about $80 million to create. And no, it can't send you back in time. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, which is not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. I want to make so many jokes, but I won't. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, probably. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes, I don't know, years, but this supercomputer can break through a lot faster. I'm talking days. Just don't go in my MSN, please.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Dishfire. It was reported by The Guardian that it had been revealed that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world. They then use these messages to pull the details of certain location information, contact networks, and the credit card details of different mobile users. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of the data, just without the actual context of the text messages. So the NSA has all your secrets and nudies, but at least they didn't share them? I don't know. Basically, they have all of this data and at any point could potentially extract certain information like past travel plans, your financial transactions, your contacts, regardless of whether or not you were being investigated for something. Yes, this sounds illegal, unethical, and a little shady, and this revelation all came before former President Barack Obama gave a speech about proposed policy changes in reaction to the whistleblowing that was going on around Snowden and the NSA.
In our 7th spot, we have the hepatitis tests. In 1956, the US government began running tests on young individuals living at the Willowbrook State School in Staten Island. This was a state-supported institution for children with intellectual disabilities. And what they did to these students was give them hepatitis in order to track the development of the viral infection. Of course, they were being experimented on without knowledge or consent. To make matters worse, the study lasted 14 years. They also injected them with a number of drugs to see what they would do to their body and the hepatitis. Imagine intentionally making a group of people sick for an experiment. The grossest part is that when the government was exposed for this project, they tried to justify their actions by saying that these people were probably gonna wind up contracting it anyways. In our 6th spot today, we have Operation Popeye. This is another very wild one. Operation Popeye was a highly classified weather modification program during the Vietnam War from 1967 to 1972. You heard me correctly. The government learned how to control the weather. Basically, they wanted to increase rainfall in certain areas to prevent enemies and military supply trucks from being able to travel. In fact, they caused a number of landslides and flooding in that area. Weather manipulation has since been banned from use for military gain. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with HIV. In the 1980s, the HIV epidemic broke out. No one knew how it spread, they just knew that it should be feared, and tons of LGBTQ+ community members were sadly contracting the virus. Well, rumor has it that HIV was a government experiment that was meant to wipe out the undesirables. Of course, the US government has denied this claim, and it's just a conspiracy, we don't know for sure. But based on the other experiments done on minority groups, it's hard to know what to believe. In our fourth spot today, we have Project 112 and Project SHAD, or SHAD. Project 112 and Project SHAD took place from 1962 to 1973 and involved a number of veterans or military personnel. Basically, both tests involved exposing these people to substances they might want to use in warfare. Nearly 6,000 people were exposed to Coxiella burnetii, which is Q fever, Staphylococcus enterotoxin B, which causes food poisoning, and sarin and soman gas. Sarin is a very, very dangerous nerve gas, and soman can cause death in minutes. Both can be fatal if only the tiniest amount gets on the skin. These men had no clue that they were being exposed to this. Moving on to number 3, we have Project Sunshine. This is another very messed up government project. During the 1950s, the US government was using stillborns to conduct radiation tests on. They wanted to determine the effects that radiation would have on humans and how much we could withstand in case of a nuclear fallout. They called this Project Sunshine, and it was anything but rainbows and sunshine. What's sad is that the government was stealing body parts and tissues from morgues without families' consent. It's said that more than 1,500 samples were gathered worldwide. This is incredibly sad and sick. Coming in at number 2, we have the syphilis experiments. In 1932, the US Public Health Service created an experiment to see the health effects of untreated syphilis. But the test subjects were told that they were receiving free treatment to cure their syphilis. And that was a lie. Instead of giving the men the recommended penicillin treatment, they gave them placebos, like aspirin. Sadly, 28 men died of syphilis because of these experiments, 100 more passed away from syphilis-related complications, and 40 spouses contracted this disease. And 19 women who gave birth passed on syphilis to their newborn children. In 1997, Bill Clinton apologized to the survivors and their families on behalf of the government. And he admitted that the tests were, and I quote, profoundly and morally wrong. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the radiation tests. In 1953, a number of tests were done on pregnant women to see the effects that radioactive iodine would have on them and their newborns. These studies were terrible. In one study, researchers gave these women doses of iodine 131. Sadly, they all miscarried. When they did, they continued to study the women's aborted embryos. Another study took place after World War II. 829 pregnant mothers in Tennessee were given vitamin drinks. They were informed that these drinks would improve their health and their babies. But it actually contained radioactive iron, and the researchers wanted to see how fast the radioisotopes crossed into the placenta. Several of the young passed away from these experiments. 4 died from cancers as a result of the experiments, and the women experienced rashes, bruises, anemia, hair and tooth loss, and cancer as well. Meanwhile, they just wanted the best for their babies and thought that this drink was going to help them, not kill them.
Coming in at number 10 is Anne Frank's attic. For those of you who don't know, Anne Frank was a German-born Jewish girl who kept a diary in which she documented life in hiding from 1942 to 1944 during the German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. She wrote every day in her diary about her life from her family's hiding place in an Amsterdam attic. Her diary was eventually published, and it's now one of the world's best-known books. Now, this photo is not of Anne, but of her father, Otto, in 1960, revisiting the attic where the family hid. He was the sole survivor of his family, so I can't imagine the pain he had revisiting this place. Later, the photographer Arnold Newman recalled taking this photo. He said, "The mood was depressing, and I immediately began photographing him. After a few moments, the Westertourn bells next door began to ring. Those were the bells that Anne wrote about. He suddenly broke down completely, weeping uncontrollably, and then so did I. We never met again. To this day, when I lecture or tell his story to people, I find I choke up. I still can't help myself. Number 9. An inmate at the Rab camp. The Rab camp was one of several Italian concentration camps, and it was established during World War II in July 1942 on the Italian-occupied island of Rab, now in Croatia. Estimates of the Commission for Determining the Crimes of the Occupiers say 4,641 detainees died at the camp, including 800 inmates who died while being transported from Rab to other concentration camps in Italy. In July 1943, after the fall of the fascist regime in Italy, the camp was closed, but some of the remaining Jewish prisoners were deported by German forces to the extermination camps. Under Italian Army Commander Mario Rotatta's watch, the ethnic cleansing and violence committed against the Slovene civilian population included summary executions, hostage-taking and ending the hostages' lives, reprisals, and the burning of houses and villages. Slovenes and Croatians suffered from cold and hunger in open-air tents, surrounded by barbed wire fence and guarded towers. At its peak, there were up to 15,000 internees. Conditions at the camp were described as appalling, filthy, muddy, overcrowded, and swarming with insects. This photo just shows how much suffering they went through. Number 8. A jail cell from the Salem witch trials. This makeshift jail cell truly brings out the horrors of the Salem witch trials. These trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused, 30 people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by hanging. Now, women vastly outnumbered men in the ranks of accused and executed. It was in cells like this one that the accused witches spent their final moments before being executed. Now, it's just sad because we all know that this was just a scare and that they weren't real witches. Many of these women were suspected and chosen because they were simply unliked.
Number 7. Friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States are not safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, which, by the way, not just a couple of random dudes, they were spying on 35 world leaders. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out, of course, and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Really went personal with the friends comment there. It's like when you show somebody a photo on your phone and they start swiping, like, hi, hello, betrayal, see ya. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader, what's the big deal here? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the Brazil spying scandal. It was reported by The Guardian that Brazil was second only to the United States in terms of the amount of communications that were being subjected to surveillance by the NSA. This means that the NSA were seriously spying on millions of Brazilians, including the emails and phone calls of their president. At the G20 summit that year, which took place in Russia, Brazil's president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, had a one-on-one meeting with Obama in reference to this. He said that he would look into it and get back to her, but before he could, more NSA tea was spilled, and it was revealed that the agency had also targeted Petrobras, which is Brazil's state oil company. This led the president to call this new information industrial espionage, and as a result, she called off her scheduled visit to the White House and demanded answers. The called off visit was important because it was to be the first state visit by a Brazilian president in about 2 decades, and although the Obama administration claimed that it was a joint decision made by both presidents, some media outlets described it as the sternest punishment that had been received at that time in response to all of these NSA leaks. This also led Brazil to take a multitude of steps to hopefully get away from the American-run internet.
Number 5. Backup. When Glenn Greenwald kicked this whole thing off in 2013 with Snowden and his reveals, it was this massive security breach, obviously. Snowden was of course in hot water immediately, but he was ahead of the game from the start. See, Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy happens to him, well, he'll just leak even more information. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, 4. That it was set up to automatically send those private documents to higher ups, aka the people directly involved in the leak. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. This is why you make backups. Duly noted, Snowden.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the embassy catastrophe. There was a document from 2007 that was leaked which named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. This document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversation, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel.
Number 3. China. I mentioned earlier that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden leaked a PowerPoint training slideshow and the tables were turned just like that. Snowden revealed himself as this massive spy kid on June 12th, and he said he was planning on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out with all this information, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since back in 2009. That's a long time ago. It's like when Avatar 1 came out. That's how long ago that was. More specifically, Snowden said that the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. Now, of course, this is eye-opening, but there's many who see this hack attack as a good thing. See, citizens want to know what their government's up to, and honestly, I myself would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats. So a poll was conducted on June 10th and 11, and apparently 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing. They were with him, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. 57% were not a fan of the NSA's action, while 37% were on board. 30% of folks liked the fact that they were being spied on. That's some weird kind of kink, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you want the NSA in your Dropbox? Let us know in the comments your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you.
In our number 2 spot today, we have caller information. In 2013, it was reported by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by Snowden, the Obama administration has allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. This was done through what was called a quote business records provision of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of George W. Bush. It allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over caller information every single day. The information included things like the time, location, and duration of the call. The information began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Of course, once these documents were leaked and the information became public knowledge, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security, but many people rightfully felt like the spying was an unnecessary invasion of their privacy. This one is tricky because there certainly is a fine line with these things.
And finally, number 1. PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation. But when it comes to the NSA, odds are it's going to be a little juicy. This slideshow is used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it? I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. Step your game up. This program called Prism cost about $20 million a year, and it was the highlight of this leak. Prism kicked off back in 2007. Originally, they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple, come 2012, well, that's when things got a little bit fishy, as most things are with Apple, specifically their maps. That was horrible. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants like Google, Skype, or even YouTube. Yeah, right here, they're listening right now. So your search history, emails, anything that rolls through those, usernames, passwords, well, they've got them. Even Skaterboy69 and Hotmail, odds are they're already looking. You're done. You're canceled, Brad. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States were accusing China of cyber attacks, but right after Edward leaked this Prism tea, they didn't have much power at that summit. China and Europe's citizens weren't too pleased here, and honestly, yeah, it's a botched meeting. I can understand why.
Coming in at number 10 is gold juice. Recently, controversies surrounding gold juice ignited after actor Taryn Manning appeared on Whitney Cummings' podcast, where she made a shocking claim about how she was offered gold juice 3 times during her career. Her statements raised many eyebrows as she talked about how many Hollywood stars achieve immense success primarily because of the gold juice. Claiming how she refused to take it multiple times, the Orange is the New Black star discussed the alleged potion at length when she was asked if she had wished to attain unimaginable heights in her acting career. She then brought up the topic of the alleged juice and said, "I didn't drink it, I didn't want it," calling it scary, and also talked about why she feels terrified of the drink. She said the gold juice supposedly lets you have everything you want, all the fame in the world, and all the money. While many on social media believe the gold juice is made up of plasma and human blood, others made up conspiracy theories and stated how this could be a metaphor for the Illuminati. Regardless, this was probably something she shouldn't have said, and hopefully she doesn't get in trouble for it. Number 7. What happened to Shelley Miscavige? Shelley Miscavige is a member of the Church of Scientology Sea Org who married Scientology leader David Miscavige. She was last seen in public in August of 2007. Now, since her disappearance, she has been the subject of speculation and inquiries regarding her whereabouts and well-being. In 2012, attorneys who said they represented her responded by saying that she was merely living a private life devoted to the Church of Scientology. Now, some former Sea Org members have said they believe Shelley is being held against her will at the compound of the Scientology's Church of Spiritual Technology Corporation near the mountain town of Running Springs in San Bernardino County, California. In August 2013, actress Leah Remedy, a former Scientologist and critic of the organization, filed a missing persons report regarding Shelley with the Los Angeles Police Department, which was closed within hours by the LAPD as unfounded. So where is Shelley? It seems like we might never know. Number 8. Blacklisted celebrities. It seems like celebrities in Hollywood that speak out on injustices get blacklisted from the industry. For example, Tippi Hedren became an actress after she was discovered by director Alfred Hitchcock while appearing on a television commercial in 1961. She achieved great praise for her work in his 2 films, The Birds and Marnie. Now, she was a star until she revealed that Hitchcock made offensive demands on her. She said, "He stared at me and simply said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, that from this time on, he expected me to make myself sexually available and accessible to him however and whenever and wherever he wanted." Hitchcock's demands led to a horrible fight, according to her. She then told him Marnie would be their last film together, and later recalled how Hitchcock told her that he would destroy her career. He said, "I'll ruin your career," and he did ruin my career. He kept me under contract and paid me to do nothing for close to 2 years, she said. Now, this has happened to various actors, and it's just sad. Number 7. Pyramids on the moon. In 1972, this image was taken by Apollo 17 during its flight to the moon near an area known as Geophone Rock. NASA listed the image as blank, but after retouching the photo, you can see that it's not completely blank. Turning up the contrast, a pyramidal structure can be seen. So, what is it? Was it some malfunction of the camera, or is there actually a pyramid on the moon? NASA has never given a credible version of the issue, which has led to some speculations about what actually can be on the moon, hidden from the public. And listen, not to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but maybe it is true that aliens built the pyramids on Earth as they look like they did it on the moon too. I don't know, but it gives you a lot to think about. While this eye looks like it may belong to a scary monster, it's actually a human eye. While rummaging through photographs that captured the devastating impact of the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this photo emerged. On the 6th and 9th of August 1945, the United States detonated 2 atomic for the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. The aerial bombings together ended the lives between 129,000 and 226,000 people. People, most of whom were civilians. When the detonated at 1,900 feet above the city center of Hiroshima. The subsequent explosion caused temperatures of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to annihilate nearly everything within 1,600 feet of the blast zone. Almost anything and anyone within a mile was destroyed. And heat were so extreme that they bleached the city's exposed surfaces, except in places where an unsuspecting person shielded the building or sidewalk or bridge from the blast with their own body in their final moments alive. Now, this is what the eye of an victim plagued by an atomic rack looks like. While it had been a well-known fact that radiation causes cataracts in animals, the development of atomic cataracts in human beings was noted after the atomic in Japan. Now, it wasn't just this person who suffered from this, but many others as well. Number 5. The Babushka Lady. The woman in the brown coat, or the Babushka Lady as she was later called by the FBI, was very close to JFK when he was assassinated in Dallas. Traveling in a presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas, JFK was assassinated, hit once in the back and once in the head. Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital for emergency medical treatment, where he was pronounced dead 30 minutes later. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald was charged with Kennedy's assassination. He denied. Oswald then was as well soon after. These theories allege the involvement of the CIA, the Mafia, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Castro, the KGB, or some combination. Now, according to eyewitnesses though, this woman, the Babushka Lady, filmed the entire thing. It's thought that from her vantage point, she may have been able to answer some critical questions about what really happened that day. However, the FBI was never able to track her down, and no one has since been able to figure out the identity of this mystery observer. Number 4. Human zoos. Yes, you might have thought that zoos were strictly for animals, but once upon a time there were human zoos, which I personally find disgusting. Now, this photo was taken in 1904, where the US government imported 1,300 indigenous Filipinos from different tribes to display at the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. Yeah, you heard that right. The government did this, but are we really that surprised? The zoos were public displays of people, usually in so-called natural or primitive state, to be seen and gawked at. These zoos were most prominent during the 19th and 20th centuries, and in the 1870s, exhibitions of so-called exotic populations became popular throughout the Western world. Human zoos could be seen in many of Europe's largest cities, such as Paris, Hamburg, London, Milan, as well as American cities such as New York City and Chicago. These people were zoo attractions among the monkeys and lizards to show off the new US possessions. These people were often bound by ropes, and visitors threw peanuts at them. The treatment of these human beings was just awful. Number 3. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. The Dyatlov Pass incident was an event in which 9 Soviet hikers died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd, 1959, under uncertain circumstances. This creepy photo shows the determined group traversing the harsh terrain just before they met their fate on the night of February 1st. The experienced trekking group from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, had established a camp in the Russian SFSR of the Soviet Union. Now, overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee the campsite while inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. Now, after the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 of them had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had died by physical trauma. One victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, and another had a small crack in his skull. 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek, and 3 of those 4 had damaged soft tissue of the head and face. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 had missing eyebrows. Number 2. Treatment of a patient with mental illness. This 1890 photo depicts a woman forced into a crucifixion pose and facing a wall. The woman is a patient at a mental institution undergoing treatment. Now, believe it or not, forced standing was considered a legitimate part of treatment for mental illness in 19th century Germany. Now, back in the 18th and early 20th century, women were sometimes institutionalized due to their opinions and their inability to be controlled properly by a primarily male-dominated culture. There were financial incentives too, because before the passage of the Married Women's Property Act 1882, all of a wife's assets passed automatically to her husband. The men who were in charge of these women, either a husband, father, or brother, could send these women to mental institutions, stating they believed that these women were mentally ill because of their strong opinions. These men had the last say when it came to the mental health of these women, so if they believed that these women were mentally ill, or if they simply wanted to silence the voices and opinions of these women, they could easily send them to mental institutions. This is what could have happened to this woman in that photograph. Now, besides standing, practices at these asylums were dark, as they had treatments that included restraints, isolation, electroshock therapy, ice baths, forced drugging, and even lobotomies. And coming in at number 1 is mustard gas tested on American military. Mustard gas is a type of chemical warfare agent, and as a chemical weapon, mustard gas was first used in World War I. In 1943, the US Navy exposed its own sailors to mustard gas. Now, officially, the Navy was testing the effectiveness of new clothing and gas masks against the deadly gas that had proven so terrifying in the First World War. Young men were approached after 8 weeks of boot camp and asked if they wanted to participate in an experiment that would help shorten the war. Obviously, they said yes, but they didn't know what they were signing up for. Only when the boys reached the research laboratory were they told the experiment involved mustard gas. Now, the participants, almost all of whom suffered several external and internal burns, were ignored by the Navy and in some cases were threatened with the Espionage Act. In 1991, the reports were finally declassified and taken before Congress. Coming in at number 10 is the melon heads. It's said if you drive through Lake County, Ohio late at night and happen to see something that resembles a pack of people with huge heads staring at you from the tall grass, you may have stumbled across the melon heads of Ohio. Allegedly, the government ran a number of experiments which eventually left a group of humans with heads swelled to enormous sizes. Now, obviously, the government found little to do with these now deformed people, so the story goes that they got dumped off in the woods near Kirtland, Ohio, not far from Cleveland. But because every story gets retold, more paranormal theories have been proposed about the melon heads. Some believe them to be the ghosts of young subjects who burned to death in a cabin fire. Now, it's said that they were subjected to tests by a man named Dr. Crow, whose work caused their heads to inflate to their larger size. Now, regardless of their origins, the melon heads get sighted most at Windsor Road, where many high schoolers go and attempt to witness them firsthand. Now, to me, that sounds absolutely terrifying, and if I ever go to Ohio, I will be avoiding that area completely. Number 9. Helltown. With a name like Helltown, it's no shock that this town had terrible things happen. Founded in 1806, Boston Village's original claim to fame was its standing as the oldest village in Summit County. But in 1974, it became the unlucky victim of nationwide anxiety over the county's disappearing forest land. The land was then given to the National Park Services, and they decided it would be home to a new park. The government began buying the properties of its longtime residents, and then, of course, the government quickly fell behind on its plan to create the park, and the village sat neglected. Now, the hellish aura of the area only continued to grow when they also acquired the Kredgy dump in 1985. Rangers visiting the site became ill and covered in rashes. It was soon discovered that the dump was highly polluted with toxic chemicals improperly disposed of. Also in the village, there is a church, which is said to have been built by Satanists, complete with upside-down crosses. There's an abandoned bus that is said to be the host of lingering ghosts, and there is the talk of mutants who were created by the chemical spill, including the monstrous snake known as the Peninsula Python. Number 8. The Butcher of Kingsbury Run. The Butcher of Kingsbury Run was an identified serial slayer who was active in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s. The deaths are characterized by the dismemberment of 13 known victims and the disposal of their remains in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run. Now, most victims came from an area east of Kingsbury Run called the Roaring Third or Hobo Jungle, known for its bars, gambling, dens, brothels, and vagrants. Now, many of the victims remain unidentified to this day, and despite an investigation of the deaths, which at one time was led by famed lawman Elliot Ness, then Cleveland's public safety director, the criminal responsible was never apprehended. Now, recent speculation suggests that the butcher may have traveled west and was also responsible for the death of Elizabeth Short of the Black Dahlia murder case. Number 7. Assassinations.
There are a lot of different events that have happened in the world that have resulted in important figures passing away, but they may not all be accidents. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was in Texas on a political trip to smooth over frictions in the Democratic Party between liberals and conservatives. Traveling in a presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas, he was assassinated, hit once in the back and once in the head. Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital for emergency medical treatment, where he was pronounced dead 30 minutes later at 1 p.m. Lee Harvey Oswald was charged with Kennedy's assassination, which he denied. Oswald was then assassinated as well soon after, and this assassination spawned numerous conspiracy theories. These theories alleged the involvement of the CIA, the Mafia, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Castro, the KGB, or some combination of these individuals and entities. The original FBI investigation and Warren Commission report, as well as an alleged benign CIA cover-up, have led to the claim that the federal government deliberately covered up crucial information in the aftermath of the assassination. Number 6. Secret societies. Many people believe that there are secret societies that rule the world, like the Illuminati, but what if I told you there actually is a society like that? It's called the Blindenberg Group, and it's an annual off-the-record forum established in 1954 to create a dialogue between Europe and North America. The group's agenda, originally to prevent another world war, is now defined as bolstering a consensus around free market Western capitalism and its interests around the globe. Participants include political leaders, experts, captains of industry, finance, academia, numbering between 100 and 150 people. Afterwards, attendees are entitled to use information gained at the meetings, but not to attribute it to a named speaker. Now, the group states the purpose of this is to encourage candid debate while at the same time maintaining privacy. Now, with all the secrecy around this, it's no wonder it left many people creating conspiracy theories around it. Number 5. Unethical practices. We all know behind closed doors the government has unethical practices. Now, one of the most shocking and dark things they do is human experimentation, especially when they don't tell the subjects that they are being experimented on. Operation Midnight Climax was an operation carried out by the CIA as a subproject of Project MKUltra, the mind control research program that began in the 1950s. Now, it was later established in 1954 by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and placed under the direction of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, under the Cold War and fears of Soviet Union and China, Dr. Sidney felt inspired to investigate methods of mind control. Operation Midnight Climax gave him permission to test drugs on unknowing citizens. So essentially, the government hired sex workers to dose their clients with LSD for mind control research purposes. Now, official results of these experiments were not released, but accounts from supervisors of the experiments give little insight to the findings. No one knows where the subjects are now or what effects they may have suffered. Operation Midnight Climax is considered to be so secretive that few people, even in the highest government positions, knew Dr. Sidney existed, let alone was conducting these experiments. Number 4. Surveillance state. The practice of mass surveillance in the United States dates back to wartime monitoring and censorship of international communications from to or which passed through the United States. After the First and Second World Wars, mass surveillance continued throughout the Cold War period via programs such as Black Chamber and Project Shamrock. Following the September 11th attacks of 2001, domestic and international mass surveillance capabilities grew immensely. As time has gone on, surveillance has just increased with the rise of computers and phones. As worldwide sales of smartphones began exceeding those of feature phones, the NSA decided to take advantage of the smartphone boom. With phones, they could access social contacts, user behavior, interests, location, photos, and credit card numbers and passwords. Now, have you ever been talking about a product to a friend and then a few days later you get ads for that product? Yep, it's because they're always listening. Number 3. Aliens Black Budget Projects. Area 51, a highly classified US Air Force facility, is at the center of numerous conspiracy theories. Explore claims about black budget projects, including advanced military technologies and experimental aircrafts, and discuss how the secrecy surrounding these initiatives fuels speculation about extraterrestrial involvement. Now, not to mention, Navy pilots have come out recently to speak about 2 experiences they had with real UFOs. Two of them were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during training exercises but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this little white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, and right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got to within a half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. Now there are other stories like this too, which is just crazy, and the higher ups knows there's aliens and they've been hiding it from us for a long time. Number 2. Suppressed technologies. Nikola Tesla, a brilliant inventor, is often associated with suppressed technologies. Tesla's innovations, such as wireless energy transmission and free energy concepts, have sparked theories suggesting that his work was intentionally buried to maintain the status quo. Then there's a car that ran on water that was also reportedly suppressed. The water fuel cell is a technical design of perpetual motion machine created by Stanley Allen Mayer. Stanley claimed that a car retrofitted with the device could use water as fuel instead of gasoline. He said that the vehicle could go 845 miles until it needed to be filled up again. Now this would be a great feat as it would be better for the environment, but it wouldn't be good for oil corporations as they would lose money. Then Stanley died, and people truly think that he was assassinated. He died suddenly on March 20th, 1998 while dining at a restaurant. His brother claimed that during a meeting with two Belgian investors, Stanley suddenly ran outside saying they poisoned me. Now after an investigation, the Grove City Police agreed with the Franklin County coroner report that ruled that Stanley, who had a high blood pressure, died of a cerebral aneurysm, but some of Stanley's supporters believe that he was assassinated to suppress his inventions. And coming at number 1 is government cover-ups. One of the most well-known government cover-ups was the Watergate scandal. It's a prime example of government cover-ups at the highest levels. Members of the Nixon administration attempted to cover up their involvement in a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex. Now the cover-up ultimately led to President Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974, as it was revealed that he had knowledge of and participated in efforts to obstruct justice. Then there's the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, which was a long-running research program conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service. The study involved withholding treatment from African American men infected with syphilis to observe the natural progression of the disease. The participants were not informed of the true nature of the study and were denied appropriate medical care. Now the cover-up continued for 4 decades until it was exposed by the media, leading to public outrage and changes in research ethic regulations. Now these are just 2 examples, but there's unfortunately many more.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Ordo Templi Orientis. The Ordo Templi Orientis is a controversial esoteric organization that was founded in the early 20th century by Karl Kellner and Theodor Reuss in Germany. Originally meant to be modeled after and associated with European Freemasonry, under the leadership of famous occultist Aleister Crowley, the group had a change in philosophy to be more aligned with Crowley's principles of Thelema. The cult is known for its secretive nature and controversial practices, including the use of ritualistic magic and sexual practices as a means of spiritual advancement. The organization has a hierarchical structure and emphasizes the importance of individualism and personal freedom. Of course, like with most cults, there are some controversial practices, but despite this controversy, the group has attracted a following among those interested in occultism and alternative spirituality. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Order of the Black Sun. The Order of the Black Sun is a secretive and controversial cult that has been the subject of much speculation and debate in recent years. Founded in the early 20th century, the group is believed to be based in Europe and has been linked to a number of bizarre and disturbing practices, including human sacrifice, occult rituals, and the worship of ancient deities. Members of the cult are said to be highly secretive and tightly knit, with their activities shrouded in mystery and hidden from public view. Many have claimed that the Order of the Black Sun is in involved in a wide range of illegal and nefarious activities that include high-level crimes as well as the manipulation of political and financial systems for their own gain. Many people claim that this group was founded by Heinrich Himmler and that its members included many high-ranking SS officers. People also have suggested that this cult attempted to use demon summoning as a way to help them win World War II. Even the demons were like, no, absolutely not. Despite numerous investigations into the group, very little concrete information is known about the Order of the Black Sun, and many questions remain unanswered about their true motives and activities. However, what is certain is that this enigmatic cult continues to captivate and intrigue people around the world, with many eager to uncover the truth about this very shadowy organization. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club was a notorious secret society that existed in Britain during the 18th century. It was an extensive club that included some of the wealthiest and most influential people of the time, including politicians, aristocrats, and members of the royal family. The club was known for its very decadent parties, which were said to involve heavy drinking and gambling and all of the things people think these elite secretive parties hold. However, there were also rumors of more sinister activities, such as satanic rituals and human sacrifice. The Hellfire Club was shrouded in secrecy, and its members went to great lengths to keep their activities hidden from the public. However, their reputation as a group of debauched and immoral individuals eventually caught up with them, and they became the subject of scandalous rumors and gossip. Today, the legacy of the Hellfire Club lives on in pop culture, with many books, movies, TV shows featuring references to the group and their supposed activities. Despite these references, though, the true nature of the club's activities remain a mystery to this day. We're just left to speculate and come up with conspiracy theories. Drop your best one down below.
Number 7. The Circleville Letter Writer. In the 1970s, residents of a small town of Circleville and Pickaway County started receiving personal, mysterious letters about their lives. Now, the letters were written in block style and contained vindictive, violent, and often vulgar material. School bus driver Mary Glipsy became the main target of the letters. The writer accused Mary, who was married, to having an affair with a married school superintendent, Gordon Massey. Now, the letters sent to Mary didn't stop, and they became increasingly threatening. Her husband, Ronald Glipsy, began receiving them too. Then in August 1977, Ronald died, and it was unknown whether the death was accidental or a homicide, but it was believed the letters were related to his death. The letters continued even after a suspect was placed in prison, and the letters continued to arrive in residents' mailboxes, both city officials and average citizens alike, until the late 90s. The writer was never revealed, and it remains an Ohio mystery to this day. Number 6. The Legend of Elizabeth's Grave. This infamous legend starts at Mount Union Pleasant Valley Cemetery, one of the most haunted cemeteries in Ohio. The rural cemetery is home to the chilling Elizabeth's grave. Now, there are two major stories to Elizabeth's legend. In the first, Elizabeth, overcome with grief over the death of her husband, hanged herself from a tree near the rear of the cemetery in which her husband was buried. In another variation, Elizabeth had her life ended in a similar manner by several men angry over her inheritance upon her husband's death. Now, in both legends, the story goes that Elizabeth was buried near the front of the cemetery. However, her tombstone mysteriously moves itself to the back of the cemetery near the location of her death, most often against the very tree from which she hung. When replaced, it would always wander back to the rear of the cemetery. Now, that's not all. It's rumored that Elizabeth still walks the cemetery, often seen in a white dress. A few people claim that apparitions of Elizabeth are accompanied by the apparitions of two shadowy men dressed in all black. Sometimes she's seen hanging from the tree where she lost her life, and some even say that on the anniversary of her death, blood drips from the tree in question. Number 5. Eugene the Mummy. An African-American man in his mid to late 40s was found dead from natural charges on a road near Sabina in Ohio. He was alone and without identification, believed to be a wanderer in search of a job. Townspeople claim to have seen him walking in town the day before, appearing to be ill. The only things in his pocket were $1.40 and a slip of paper with the address 1118 Yale Avenue, Cincinnati. Upon investigation, authorities arrived at the address only to find a vacant lot. The identity of the man was still a complete mystery, so they decided that the name of a nearby neighbor, Eugene, would work for the time being, at least until they figured out who he was. This man, now named Eugene, was brought to Sabina's Littleton funeral home and embalmed. They then set the mummified man in a brick shed near a bus stop so that people could come by and identify the body. Now the typical 30-day period of viewing passed with no luck, but pretty soon though, Eugene became a permanent resident of Sabina. He just sat there on the side of the road for years. Now the town loved what they called their town mascot, and Eugene had a couch to rest on, was dusted and cleaned, and his clothes were changed when they got dingy. Over a period of 35 years, it is estimated that Sabina's mummy man was viewed by 1.5 million people, but he's still never been identified. Now I'm sorry, I can't believe they were able to do that. That is sick. Number 4. Moonville Tunnel. Located deep in the woods, the Moonville Tunnel is framed by faded stone archways covered in moss. Now the tunnel itself is long and extremely dark, and it's actually an out-of-work stretch of railroad track that leads to an old coal mining town, and of course, it's haunted. Now the most infamous Moonville ghost story originated in 1880 when engineer Theodore Lawhead was driving a train down the dark desolate tracks from Cincinnati to Moretta when another train unexpectedly collided with his. This was apparently a train dispatcher's mistake, and Theodore and a fireman died instantly. As early as 1895, ghost stories about a figure thought to be Theodore holding a bright white lantern with a flowing white beard, eyes that glistened like balls of fire, and a halo of twinkling stars would appear and just as quickly disappear. In addition to the engineer, Moonville is supposedly haunted by a railway brakeman who looms in the tunnel, a woman who smells like lavender, and a bully named Baldy Keaton who has been known to throw rocks and tease people. Number 3. Beaver Creek State Park. This park is special because of its history of being a canal system in the 1800s with locks that still remain in the park. One of them, called Jake's Lock, is said to be haunted by Jake, a canal worker who was struck by lightning while walking across the top. Many other legends exist within the park, including the tale of Esther Hale, known as the Bride of the Bridge. On the morning of her wedding, someone was sent to check on the groom to find that his house was empty and he was never seen again. Esther, grieving for months wondering what happened to her soon-to-be husband, was then found dead in her home. According to the book Haunted Ohio II, it's said by the locals that you can still see her dressed in white, looking for her bridegroom on the bridge over Beaver Creek. She waits there every year on August 12th, a hideous figure in tattered white satin and lace, and if she touches you, she will become young and beautiful again, but you will die. Number 2. Malabar Farm. Malabar Farm was built in 1939 by Pulitzer Prize winning author Louis Broomfield, and it was his home until his death in 1956. But before it was built, another family lived there in the 19th century. Celie Rose, who lived there, was said to be half child and half woman, according to an 1896 newspaper article. Now she was infatuated with a boy named Guy Barry who lived in a neighboring farmhouse. They saw each other every day, but her parents told her to stay away from him. Now she didn't like that and got angry at them, so she mixed rat poison in their porridge. Her father and brother died, but her mother survived. She was found not guilty by reason of insanity and went to live with her mother. Celie then poisoned her again, and this time it worked. At age 23, Celie stood trial, truly alone, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. She lived out the rest of her life at an insane asylum, and since then the house has been haunted. One visitor saw a woman dressed like Celie Rose outside the house. People have seen lights flicker, felt a phantom cat, disembodied voices are heard, and there's an overall eerie feeling on the property. And coming in at number 1 is the Franklin Castle. The Franklin Castle is arguably the most haunted house in Ohio due to the Tideman's family's tragic past. Hans Tideman, a German immigrant and co-founder of Union Banking and Savings Co., built the home in 1881. His first wife, Louisa, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s, and he would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they'd encouraged a crying girl while on the 3rd floor. Now they kept having a bunch of paranormal experiences, and a priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did. But the hauntings didn't stop when the Romanos left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window.